Well, very dear students and everybody, here is once again another short video on George Eliot's novel Mill on the Floss. On the very outset, I must suggest that the novel Mill on the Floss should be taken in three ways. Number one, it has partly the feministic approach in it. Number two, partly this is the modern novel because a lot of psychology is discussed in this novel. And number three, it's a romantic, loving Victorian novelist approach and tale as well. So, seen in this context, when we look at this novel, we have one of the major characters in this novel, that is Maggie. Maggie Tolliver, she is at this moment when the novel opens, we find her to be a child. That child who is most of the time absorbed in her own world, of the stories of imaginative thinking and of having a limited world where her father and her brother is the most important commodity and asset for her. Besides that, she has got her own moods and curiosities as well. So this type of girl, and her appearance also is very significant because she's got a lot of hair on her head, and her complexion is not as the complexion of other girls of the British people could be. So in a way, a little bit different child is there. But that child is termed by the mother as the wayward child as well, and the prediction also comes from the mother for some time that one day she will be drowned into the river. That river, whose title we have here in the novel as Floss, River Floss, which is powerful, beautiful, and significant river for the people who live in the town St. Arcs. On that very river, a mill is situated, that is Darlcote Mill. In that mill, grinding takes place, and the white flour of the corn comes outside of that. So it's a very significant thing in this novel because mill is the introduction of technology, of science, and of modern ways of life. But it still runs not on the engine but on the water. The wooden wheel revolves because of the pressure of the water, and the mill runs on. This mill is very important in the novel. Let us see how does it take place. But before going further, let's talk about another child who is Tom. Tom Tulliver is Maggie's brother. That Tom is also very wayward child, but he's just like a boy. George Eliot has tried to give two different versions of the children, one child as a boy and one child as a girl. She tries to discuss the expectations which are from the girls, and the parents have this type of expectations. The social setup used to have, the Victorian social setup used to have from the girls, and same is the case what expectations can be from the boys. Now, the father, Mr. Tulliver and Miss Tulliver, they are a good couple. However, they have their usual issues of the marital life. And the good thing about their relationship is that both of them are very much concerned about their children. They want to give good place, good space to their children. And especially Tom's father, Mr. Tulliver, he wants to give very best education to his son because according to him, if the person is educated, he is more powerful and can communicate to the people in a more powerful way. He's thinking also because his mill is under threat. Mr. Philip's father, Mr. Wickham, is there, who is a lawyer, who is an educated person, and there's a constant threat from Mr. Wickham that somehow the mill may be snatched from Mr. Tulliver. So that is why he wants to fight the case, but he thinks that he's an uneducated person and he's not having those qualifications with which he can save his mill and defeat his enemy. So he wants his Tom to get as best education as possible. Tom is sent to Mr. Stelling's on the advice of Mr. Riley, who is also one of the lawyers. And there, Tom tries to perform as good as possible, but as usual, a wayward boy, a careless boy, is unable to perform good at the academy of Sir Stelling, who is a very capable person. And in that very academy, he meets the future friend, Mr. Phillips, and both of them talk to each other, live with each other. Rather, Phillips is there to help Tom as much as possible. And the same academy provides a chance to Maggie when she is a teenager that she may be able to meet Mr. Phillip as well. Now, Philip, though a hunchback boy in comparison to Tom, is a very weak person, but mentally he's a very strong person, and therefore he can invent imaginative stories. He can make number of artistic things, and that is why he is able to secure a little place in the heart of Maggie, who too is imaginative, who too lives in the world of imagination, and that is why both of them begin to have a little bit of common sharing of things with each other when they are just children. But let's go first of all towards Maggie's imaginative side. It's so strong that whenever Maggie is angry or she is frustrated, she would go to one of the places at their home, which is called attic. In that attic, she's got one wooden doll. Maggie would go to that doll, talk to that doll. Sometimes she would drive nails into that doll, and sometimes she would say bad things to that doll in order to express her anger. And one day she expressed the same anger in a very bitter way when Maggie threw Lucy, her cousin, into a muddy pond because of the anger that Tom was not paying much attention to her. And Tom was all the time giving more attention to Lucy. So anger was there as Maggie thought that Tom was more of her property as compared to that of Lucy. So when there was the threat from Tom, there was a threat from the father that because of this behavior with Lucy, Maggie thought she would be punished. She thought of becoming a gypsy queen. So she ran away from the house without thinking what problems can come to that child. She ran out of that and went to many other places here and there, knowing not, and ultimately reaching in a place where she could find the gypsies type of people living, and she found that the life of those gypsies is really very difficult, very dirty and ugly as well, according to her. And so the dream of becoming a gypsy queen was shattered there. This is the first place where her imagination or her imaginative world is shattered into reality, and she had to come back without becoming the gypsy queen. Such is the child Maggie. With the passage of time, Maggie's life becomes even more trial like and test like life because she falls in love with Philip and meets him occasionally, while on the other hand, the mill is, at the verge of being snatched from Mr. Tulliver, and Mr. Philip is the son of Mr. Wickham, who is the claimant of the mill. With the passage of time, the mill is given to Mr. Wickham and Mr. Tulliver becomes jobless. Mr. Tulliver becomes without the mill. So the sources of income, all which had come to him, they are stopped. Meanwhile, for the education of Tom, the loan has been obtained from the sisters of Mrs. Tulliver, and Mr. Tulliver had gone to his sister as well in order to get his money given to her husband, but it's not possible, and so Mr. Tulliver is without money. All these things combined together with the frustration bring Tom back without completing his education. And but Maggie, still in love with Philip, secretly meets him, and here another trial begins for Maggie because the father, the dying father, says that Maggie has not to meet Philip at all, and some kind of revenge may be arranged, and ultimately Mr. Tulliver dies, and Maggie has to say goodbye to Mr. Philip. That is the first frustrating experience of love for Maggie. But the same experience of love comes again more frustrated when Maggie lives with her cousin Lucy for some time, and there she meets Lucy's fiance, Mr. Stephen, who is a very attractive person, who is a kind of person to whom any girl would be attracted. Although Maggie knows that Lucy is the fiancée of Mr. Steven and they have a relationship, a type of good relationship, even then Maggie lets herself flow on the tide of love. Though she didn't want to snatch Mr. Steven from her cousin Lucy, but still the fascination, the kind of attraction continued. Keeping the story as brief as possible, we may say that Tom, on the one hand, was making struggle after the death of his father to succeed in life, but on the other hand, Maggie was involving gradually with Mr. Stephen, and one day, both Mr. Stephen and Maggie have a plan to go on boat riding in the river. But the same boat riding proves fatal to the story of Maggie because when they go out, it becomes difficult for them to come back. And according to the Victorian principles, if a girl goes outside with the boy, it's a case of elopement and she should come back after marrying the boy. And if she doesn't come back after marrying, at that time she would be outcast from the society. Same happens, same takes place, and Maggie comes back, though there are many reasons why she comes back and why they couldn't marry, or why Maggie was accused of eloping with Stephen. But still, the society expels Maggie Even her brother, the beloved brother, Mr. Tom, refuses to keep her in his home, and the mom of Maggie is unable to stop Tom from doing so. And ultimately, a childhood friend, a friend is there who used to provide books to Maggie in her childhood. That person is very poor, of course, and that person gives refuge to Maggie. Even the shelter is not given by the priest of that village. Here, even religion failed to provide shelter to a woman who is wrongly accused of eloping, who was just taking care of her cousin, and she came back without marrying that man. So she had to live all alone with that boy who was providing books to Maggie and Tom, and he was the friend of Tom as well in his childhood. But the things have to take a very different turn as well. This is the novel by George Eliot. This is the novel where the psychology of the people is to be revealed. This is the novel where tests and trials of the women are to be held. This is the novel where Maggie is the representative of women who show their courage and are not ready to do anything which is against the kind of psychology of a person, which is the honest psychology. In that regard, she may be equated with Jane Eyre, who also refused to marry a man who was already married, besides the fact that she was very poor. Same is the case here, that when Maggie comes back after her rendezvous with Mr. Stephen, the thought of not marrying him is not there. The thought of exploiting and cheating the cousin, that is there, which had stopped. So this is the second time Maggie gives the sacrifice. First, when she had to let go Mr. Philip on the insistence of her brother, and then she had to let go Mr. Stephen because it was the fiance of her own cousin, and that's why she had come back. But nature takes its own turn. You know, the St. Arcs village or the town is situated, Dalcourt Mill is also situated on the bank of River Floss, and Floss is notorious of flooding again and again. And when it floods not only the streets but also the mill, but also the area surrounding that. And so, same things happen, and as a result river is flooded one day. And Maggie is such a kind, lovely girl that for her the thought of not saving herself is there, but the thought of saving her brother is there, about whom she knows that he will be in the mill, and he doesn't know that the water of the river is going to be flooded, and he doesn't know to come back. So Maggie runs in a boat, drives the boat quite close to the mill Dalcourt, and calls her brother again and again, but she is unable to save him because the water reaches there. Now, when Tom looks at Maggie, calling him and making an attempt to save him, at that time Tom also runs outside in order to save Maggie. So both are trying to save each other in the river water, but they are unable to save each other. With the passage of time, the water rises and the boat drowns, and both of these people are discovered later on when the floods recede, that both of the brother and the sister are in the arms of each other. So once again, Maggie and Tom have been separated because of the circumstances of their life, the difficult conflicts of their life. They have been united once again. So it is basically the story of the conflict. Lukács, the famous critic and theorist, says that the stories come into being only when the conflict begins between the internal world and the external world. In case of Maggie, the conflict had begun between love and duty. So in both cases, she had to sacrifice her love for the sake of her duty. So that is why the story developed like that, and ultimately it became a tragic story for Maggie. Maggie's childhood goes to reveal to us the psychology of children, and Maggie's adulthood goes to show how a young girl would think about herself and how much she could be sacrificing. That is what is revealed to us. Not only this, social psychology has also been pointed out, that how does the society treat the people who fail or even slightly fail to abide by the traditions and the rules set up by the society. This is the attempt gone and shown by Maggie, that she can resist. So that is the representation of the resistance of women also to some of the rules and norms adopted by the societies in order to keep control the femininity and sexuality of women. Not only this, we can also see that as the decisions are not passed by the writer in order to declare some character to be good and bad, like Chaucer, she goes to talk about the actions and the reactions of the characters, and from there we are able to judge what type of one character is going to be. So there's a soul dissection, there's the mental dissection, which is the working of the mind shown to us by the writer, and therefore it is going to be the modern novel as well. Well, it is written in the Victorian age, so it's a love tale as well, because we see that love is generating and love is facing difficulties, and ultimately the same love causes the death as well as it used to happen mostly in the folk tales where love fails to succeed. By success, I mean the union. And most of the time, it doesn't succeed in such stories, and that is why the tragedy is there. With respect to this tragedy, the heroine's tragedy can be compared with the tragedy which happens in Hardy's novel The Return of the Native, where also the heroine tries to do what she wants to do, but ultimately, even she tries to do with love or with through love, she fails to do so, and death comes to her. Same is the case with Maggie as well. Maggie has died, but the struggle, the resistance, or the type of thinking, the psychology she had that is striving to survive even today, that's available even today. Maggie's story is going to be the story of every girl here, even today in our society in Pakistan as well. And in that way, Maggie's character and Maggie's life becomes universal. She is really a real woman, a real girl who had tried to show what she is and what she wants, and she tries to get all these things through honest means, not through unfair means. And this is what I can say in the introduction of this novel, Mill on the Floss, and some of the characters which are available in this novel. Hopefully, we shall be meeting in some other video like that, where some other novel will be highlighted. If you people are happy with this description of the novel, do subscribe to my channel, and do not fail to click on the bell so that you can get a notification. Thank you for watching. That's it for this day.